Welcome to Fantasy Football Today, Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings. Redraft season may be over, even for those people playing into Week 18, but Dynasty season never ends, and we have for you a Superflex tight end premium startup mock draft. Alfredo Brown is here with me, our good friend from Football Guys. How excited are you to do a mock draft the day after the NFL season ends? We know everything, right, Alfredo?
I was just telling you, man, I was like, I have to really flip my brain onto Dynasty mode. And it's not even Dynasty mode. All the things you listed, you got to go Superflex, tight end premium. We don't have rookies in this. So I'm trying to get my mind right here a little bit. But I know what? I'm excited. I'm excited to turn the page. The offseason is the most fun time of the year for me. And doing this just seems like the right way to start.
And really, the right way to start is with Jacob Gibbs having some technical difficulties and not here yet, but hopefully will be soon. With Dan Schneier auto drafting, because I think he forgot about the mock draft, as he does in most of our mock drafts. This is the way, and I wouldn't tell you guys this if it was somebody who's not on FFT Dynasty regularly, but I hope that next time that Gibbs is on, which hopefully will be in the next 15 minutes or so, or the next time that Dan's on, that you bring this up. So again, this is a Superflex, tight end premium, start 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 1 regular flex, 1 super flex. We're going 16 rounds, and the clock is about to run out on Dan for the second time. I'm going to kick him out of the league. And the question came across from Brian. I'm curious to see where Heath, of all people, values Patrick Mahomes in this format. And honestly, probably right about now. The draft has started. I took Josh Allen at number 1 overall. Number 2 was Alfredo. He took Lamar Jackson. Number 3, Jacob Gibbs took Brock Bowers. Dan auto-drafted Jahmyr Gibbs twice, but we're going to back that out for him one last time because he says that he's here now and he's sorry. And we're going to forgive you, Dan, and give you a pick. I would take Patrick Mahomes with the 4th pick. Alfredo, you said you were glad you didn't have the 3rd pick. Who would you take 4th overall with Allen, Jackson, and Bowers gone?
Oh God. I hate this pick right here, but it also feels like you kind of can't go wrong. It's just you're just picking different flavors between honestly Mahomes, Burrow, Jaden Daniels. I think I'd probably lean Mahomes as well, just because I feel like you get the safest out of the bunch there. Burrow, everything's up in the air with Higgins, Chase, all these guys. At least with Mahomes, I feel like you've kind of seen the floor. You've kind of seen how bad it can be when he doesn't have all of his weapons, and then you know what that ceiling is. So if I want to make sure I absolutely hit my pick in a Superflex league where I'm the 4th pick overall in Dynasty, I'm holding on to these guys for a long time. Yeah, Patrick Mahomes is probably the guy for me.
And that's you brought up a good point because I think some people will hear that and think, Mahomes, man, he was off. This is a 6 points per pass touchdown league. All of our CBS leagues are. And so Dan just took Jaden Daniels. That wouldn't have changed his pick. He knows that. He works for us, which you would think he would be here on time for the mock draft. But Dan took Jaden Daniels. Jamie takes Jalen Hurts. Those guys I would take ahead of Mahomes for sure in a 4 point per pass touchdown league. In 6, I would take Mahomes, which is what Matt Donnelly just did. So again, we start the draft off with Allen, Jackson, Bowers, Daniels, Hurts, Mahomes. It feels like it's everybody's top 5 quarterbacks, and Brock Bowers right in the middle. I told you Jacob Gibbs was going to take Brock Bowers in that spot. What's the earliest you would take a tight end? We're doing half point bonus per reception for tight ends. So 1 point per reception for everyone else, 1.5 for tight ends. What's the earliest you would take a tight end, Alfredo?
I think it would probably be about now at this pick 7 or 8 in this area once all of my top tier quarterbacks are off the board and I'm just moving on to guys that are younger like the Caleb Williams and those guys and trying to project. With the tight end premium, I don't know that I give it as much of a boost as a bunch of other people do because it's the same across the board. Every tight end gets that tight end premium. Whereas with the quarterbacks, like I want to make sure I get an elite quarterback because it is a positional advantage for your roster, for your lineup. So yeah, as great as Brock Bowers is, I don't know that I would have taken him 3, but also Jacob Gibbs is a lot smarter than me. So I'm just going to give him credit where credit's due.
I don't know if anybody's a lot smarter than you, Alfredo. There's probably a lot of people that are a little bit smarter than you.
A little
But
bit,
you're a smart guy. I do think, like, yes, all the tight ends get that bonus, but if you can draft the guy who has more catches than any other rookie ever, then that bonus is going to be worth a little bit more for him than it is for others. We know that that bonus for Travis Kelce has been an enormous edge historically. I think we've got Gibbs coming in very shortly. I see him working furiously backstage. He is ready to draft. I think Jonathan says, thank you, Heath, for another championship. Thank you, everybody here, for letting us do this show. Jacob Gibbs, are you here? Can we hear you?
Hey, how's it going?
There he is.
Ooh,
Yeah, a bit of a rough start. But yeah, I just got through a blizzard this weekend, man. I don't know if you know that we got like 15 inches of snow in Kansas City or something insane. So yeah, we're just rolling with it.
Yeah, it's thoughts and prayers to everybody in Kansas City and the path of the storm. I think it's headed to the East Coast now, which is probably going to create all kinds of troubles. We've got winds and snow, and I think I talked to some people who were actually down south, and they didn't get much snow at all, but they got a whole lot of ice, and that's almost worse in some ways. So yeah, it's I fully understand. I know you've been traveling for the holidays. We appreciate you being here with us today. You took Brock Bowers at 3rd overall. No one else has taken another tight end yet. Is he the only tight end who you think should go in the first round of this format?
Yeah, I think you could make a case for Trey McBride. But really it's Bowers there. And 3 is clearly a reach. It probably should have been Jaden Daniels, or Mahomes would be next for me. But yeah, I think Bowers has the potential to give you that insane positional edge. He outscored McBride by 20 points this year, and then outscored the tight end 3 by 60 points in this format. And that was with just 4 touchdowns as a rookie. So I feel pretty good about locking him in, and we'll see. I wanted to go with kind of an interesting team construction here to see how it plays out.
So round 1 is complete. I took Josh Allen. Alfredo took Lamar Jackson, then Brock Bowers. We talked about those picks a lot. Dan auto-drafted Jahmyr Gibbs 3 times, but actually took Jaden Daniels. Then we saw Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Justin Herbert, Bijan Robinson, and Jordan Love rounds out the top 12. So only 2 wide receivers go in the first round, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and 1 running back sneaks into the first round, Bijan Robinson. Now, I know Joshua Cho. He loves, JB Cho knows on Twitter, he loves his running backs. And Bijan, I think, like, he and Gibbs really earned it this season, especially if you played into week 18 with Gibbs. How high are you comfortable in this format, Alfredo, taking one of those 2 running backs? I've basically got them tied in my dynasty rankings. It's a 1A, 1B situation. Feels like a pretty huge edge on the field if you have one of those guys.
Yeah, I think the earliest I'd probably go is that mid round 2 spot. Just because I want to make sure that I load up on my quarterbacks or others, or at least in the first round. And then maybe if I'm sitting there, for example, like pick 6, where we see Patrick Mahomes off the board, I'd probably be looking at Bijan or Gibbs at that spot. But ideally, if I'm going to be really greedy and see how long I can wait, end of round 2. But I don't know that I want to sneak a running back into round 1.
And we're going to we got another auto pick. This is going to happen a couple of times in the first, it's everybody's first mock draft of 2025. And I know what Joel Cox wants to do here because he took Jamar Chase in round 1, and I think he wanted Puka, but it's hard to start with 2 wide receivers in a Superflex league where you have tight end premium. So he's going to take Brock Purdy here. So he will start with Chase and Purdy in the first 2 rounds. Gibbs, I wonder if we're getting to the point with 8 quarterbacks taken in round 1, now 2 quarterbacks off the board with the first 4 picks of round 2. Are we getting close to the point to where we should have that little gap in quarterbacks being drafted, or you still see a lot of guys worth a round 2 pick?
Yeah, I personally would be taking, like Brian Thomas Jr. just went, Puka Nacua over a lot of these quarterbacks that are available in this range. And then even looking at the guys at the back half there of the back end of round 1, early round 2, I would take Neighbors ahead of all those guys, and probably CeeDee Lamb as well. I do like Love and Herbert a lot. But yeah, I think I just feel so good about some of these elite young pass catchers that just came into the league. And I don't see as big of a difference between like Herbert and some of these other quarterbacks that you can get in round 3.
So I think, Alfredo, that the interesting thing is that it's really hard in this format to know what you're going to be able to get in round 3. Gibbs just said Herbert. He actually went in round 1. But like we see quarterbacks, sometimes you'll get a run. And I think if you get through round 1 and you haven't taken a quarterback, and now it's round 2, and in Joel's instance, he's not going to pick again in 18 picks. How scared are you to go into round 3, the end of round 3, without a QB1?
Without a QB1, I'm pretty scared. I mean, that really depends on what's still there on the board. For example, like there's some quarterbacks that I do like here, but I'm on the clock right now, and I'm gonna pass up on some of these quarterbacks. Am I? No,
Drake.
I thought there was another wide receiver that was available. I guess he's not, and I missed that.
Drake May is who I had in mind. I said quarterbacks you can get in round 3
yeah.
because I didn't want Dan to snipe me. But that's who I had in mind. To me, there's not a huge difference between him and Love and Herbert and that tier of quarterbacks.
And you just took Drake May in round 2, and so Alfredo is on the clock. Already has a quarterback. Not much pressure in this spot. You can take whatever position you want.
Round at the end of round 2, like that's amazing. That's a guy that we've been taking in the top 8, top 10 most years, and it's not like he had a bad year. Like,
yeah, no, I think it's a great pick, and my pick would have been much more difficult if he had not taken him, because I had 2 guys kind of back to back. One of them, the proven number 1 wide receiver. One of them, I don't think there's any way he would have made it to the 2-3 turn if we were doing this draft a year ago, and he hadn't even played football yet. But I'm going to go ahead and take Caleb. So I will start my draft with Josh Allen and Caleb Williams. That feels pretty awesome. I think it's gonna be a good time. And I guess somebody already took Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, it feels like he's been drafted 7 times in this draft. But this is where it gets a little bit difficult. I think I know who Jacob wants, and I'll just tell you, like, if you've never hosted a live mock draft while hosting a podcast, it's really difficult. Not any fun at all.
It's a top 5 worst experience of my life that I've had before.
Yes. So the only thing I can really do is try to troll you guys at the turn. So I'll go ahead and take Nico at the start of round 3 and start off with Josh Allen, Caleb Williams, and Nico Collins. Grade my turn, Jacob Gibbs.
A+. What a start. Man.
Azer has what a good guy Adam Azer is. He is in this draft. We'll talk about his team in just a second, but he just posted a link to my quarterback rankings so that everybody could see my Dynasty quarterback rankings. It would have been more helpful if he had posted my Superflex top 150, which you can get over on Sportsline. So then everybody would have been able to see an actual like draft board. I think what's probably happened is Adam was trying to look helpful while also maintaining an advantage on the league, which sounds exactly like him. Let's talk about round 2. Alfredo's on the clock. I'm not going to give him a question yet, but round 2 goes CJ Stroud, CeeDee Lamb, Malik Neighbors, Brock Purdy, Puka Nacua, Brian Thomas Jr., Trey McBride, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jared Goff, Drake May, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Caleb Williams. Again, that is Stroud, Lamb, Neighbors, Purdy, Nacua, Thomas, McBride, Gibbs, Goff, May, St. Brown, and Caleb. I think Trey McBride from Matt Donnelly might be the steal of this draft late in round 2 in a tight end premium. Love that pick. Anything else that stands out to you, Alfredo, that you really like in this round?
Well, I kind of want to pat myself on the back for getting that Amon-Ra St. Brown pick at the end of round 2.
It was really
fun.
nice.
Yeah, honestly, it's team 11. Who's that one? I got it like a little bit minimized. Joshua. I know he went running back in the first round, and I didn't love the Bijan Robinson pick, but getting CeeDee Lamb there in the second after a couple other teams, on the turn, team 12 goes Love and Stroud. Yeah, just like what Jacob said, CeeDee Lamb for me is a guy that I probably would have taken right there at the end of round 1, looking at that pick 10. So to get him where he did in round 2, I absolutely love that.
Shout out Adam Mazer. Got his New York Giant Malik Neighbors. That's a top 10 pick for me in Dynasty.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, it's. I think he's my number 3 wide receiver right now. We had at this time last year, Jacob, where it was kind of Chase, Jefferson, and Lamb. Pick your favorite flavor. No, we don't know for sure who the best is. Now it feels like to me it's Chase and Jefferson at the top, and then you've got Neighbors, Lamb, maybe Nico in that group, maybe Brian Thomas, maybe Puka in that group. Do you feel like Chase and Jefferson have separated themselves as a clear top tier once again at wide receiver?
Yeah, I think that's where we're at. I would have Neighbors next, and then I think Lamb, Puka, and BTJ are all in a tier together.
So you gave Adam Azer a shout out for getting his New York Giant in round 2. He just took Baker Mayfield in round 3. Alfredo, I think this has been like if I wish you see those charts of a player's dynasty value over the life of their career, and Baker's is probably one of the most amusing. Is it going to continue going? And Azer says it in the chat, kind of low in Heath's dynasty rankings. Yes, I brought it up because I think it's a bad pick, Adam. Do you think that he continues like this level of play for the next 2 to 3 years, or is it the history of Baker Mayfield's career? What goes up must come down.
I don't know that it's any of those things. I think a lot of it is just going to be he's been in the right circumstance, in the right place with very talented receivers around him. Mike Evans is getting a little bit older. He's going to go into his year 32 season here. Maybe he's got one more season. I know he just had another 1,000-yard season. He looks great. How much longer does he really have? Chris Godwin, I don't know what's going to happen with him. I would have thought that he wouldn't be coming back, but with the injury, maybe he doesn't get a contract elsewhere. So Baker probably gives you another good season. I don't know that he's giving you another good 2 to 3 seasons. I think it's just going to be very dependent on the circumstances around him.
Liam Cohen could leave too. Like there's a lot that could change.
I'm old enough to remember when we were worried about Dave Canales leaving.
Yeah, I mean, things are even better this year. I guess we could give it all to Baker and Bucky, but I really, really loved what we saw from Cohen.
And Thomas, correct. You always love Thomas in the private chat, correcting Gibbs. Azer didn't get Neighbors. Adam Pfeiffer did. Thank you for keeping us. And we got multiple Adams in this draft. And Gibbs illustrating how difficult this really is to do a podcast and do a draft and talk about them both coherently at the same time. We are almost to the end of round 3. I want to take a look at what has happened so far. And listen, I know some of you are listening on just the podcasts a day later. And so I'm trying to say the names as often as possible. For those of you here on the YouTube chat, thank you. Thank Thomas for putting this graphic up so you can just keep seeing who's available. So maybe you don't need me to say these names quite as often, but I'm going to keep doing it. So start of round 3, I crushed Jacob's soul by taking Nico Collins. Alfredo took Kyler Murray, which I think was a really good pick. Then Drake London goes to Gibbs. Then we have Marvin Harrison Jr., kind of like my Caleb pick. Like nobody would have thought Marvin Harrison was going to be available in round 3 of a startup draft. Bo Nix, Breece Hall, Baker Mayfield, Trevor Lawrence, Devon Achane, Garrett Wilson, A.J. Brown, and then R.J. with a very good pick, Jackson Smith and Jigba. So I think we've got 3. That make it 4 running backs in the first 3 rounds of this draft. Dan came on the show last week and said that his New Year's resolution was that he was going to react to this great running back season and the way the NFL's changed and everybody playing too high and all this fantasy production going to running backs. The league is not reacting. 4 running backs taken in the first 3 rounds. Is this about how you have it, though?
I was thinking about Achane at my pick, like early 3rd round. So I think that was really good value. Really, all the guys that went at the end of the 3rd round here, I think were great picks. Breece is tough to feel confident about. He's definitely somebody you can get at a discount if you do believe in him right now. But yeah, just in general, I've been surprised at how low the running backs and receivers are getting pushed down the board. Like I thought maybe I would get Lawrence in round 4, Baker Mayfield. It surprised me a little bit to see those guys go against potentially elite flex options and like somebody like Jackson Smith and Jigba or Garrett Wilson, who's been a round 1, round 2 pick in Dynasty in the past.
Alfredo, I'm curious how you see, Jacob mentioned how, risky really Breece Hall feels. And I agree, but we've always thought like he's a top 5 dynasty running back. No matter what, like if things are going to get better, he's a top 5 dynasty running back. Kyren Williams has kind of been the opposite. We've always thought he's about to be replaced. This guy's not actually that good. It's just volume. I actually now have Kyren Williams one spot ahead of Breece Hall in my dynasty running back rankings. Where are you at on those two?
I am at the exact same thing. I was fleshing out my dynasty rankings this morning. I ended up with Gibbs, Bijan, Achane in the top 3, Saquon at 4, Jonathan Taylor at 5, Kyren at 6, Breece at 7. And honestly, it feels like Breece is a lot closer to Josh Jacobs, who I have at 8, than he is to Kyren.
Wow.
There was just a really ugly back half of the season for me with Breece, who I've struggled with Breece throughout his career because he's had so many ups and downs, and so much of what he's been able to do, not that he's a bad player, but so much of what he's been able to do has been solely based on getting those check down passes. And I'm curious to see what this offense does going forward. New quarterback, new coach, new everything on offense. And we also saw towards the end of the year, Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen really became part of the backfield. I don't know that we're going to get the Breece Hall 20 touches per game anymore. I know we get a little scared about most of our running backs, but I don't know that we're going to see that anymore.
Okay, Jacob. So I have had to make a few picks for one of the managers, but because of the blizzard that you mentioned. And one of those picks just happened, and I was just kind of going off of my own rankings. And this is interesting because Tua just went as well, and that was kind of the guy I wanted to compare him to. Sam Darnold has had a remarkable season. Last night, notwithstanding. But last night, I think, kind of highlights what everybody's concerned about in Dynasty. Is he going to turn into a pumpkin in the playoffs? And then Minnesota decides they're not going to give him any money. And then he goes to a bad situation. And then he's NFL Sam Darnold again. How are you viewing him in contrast? I guess I'll put 2 names out there because he could obviously follow the Baker path and just turn into somebody that we feel good about as a starter, especially in this format. But also, I think the guy who went right after him, Tua Tagovailoa, and then like between those two, Anthony Richardson, like we don't know for sure how many years the 3 of those have combined as a starting quarterback in the NFL. Yeah,
for sure. I was hoping Richardson would get to me. You know, I'm sick. Darnold is really tough to evaluate. I think I am a little bit leery of what we'll see in the playoffs. It felt like just a week ago, it's like for sure Darnold's locked in. They're going to have to do whatever they can to retain him and run it, hard with him. But what Detroit did was really interesting. They just came out and were like, we're going to play man press coverage like we always do, even more than normal, and see what you guys can do. And it bothered Minnesota. They really had a tough time getting the ball to the receivers. We saw some bad misses from Darnold. And so I'm curious if other teams will try to emulate that depending on who gets Minnesota in the playoff matchups. I would feel a little bit nervous taking him in this range. I would have taken Richardson personally.
Yeah, I think I feel more confident that Sam Darnold's going to start all of next season than I do Anthony Richardson.
Sure.
Obviously, Anthony Richardson has a lot more upside, even in a league that rewards 6 points per pass touchdown, than Sam Darnold does. And I think you said I'm sick. Is that what you said?
Yeah, sick in there. Can't stop drafting Kyle Pitts and Anthony Richardson type guys.
Exactly. Yes, that's what I was going to say. Like, I think you don't really think about floor. You don't really care about floor. Floor doesn't matter. I think what you said before the season was you're going to die anyway. Like either way, it's fine.
Devon H. before the season.
and it's accurate. But for anyone who does, I think you'd see why you get a little bit worried about drafting an Anthony Richardson, specifically in a Superflex. In a 1 QB league, I don't think there's any argument you want to take Richardson over a Sam Darnold because floor actually doesn't matter. In a Superflex league, man, you can get into a spot if you draft that way where all of a sudden you don't have any quarterbacks. Sure. We just got to the end of round 4. I made a couple of picks. I don't think Gibbs is going to be upset about either of them, which kind of upsets me. But let's talk about round 4 of this Superflex tight end premium mock draft. It's Sam Laporta, the 3rd tight end off the board in this format, and I think the only other tight end to be drafted in the first 4 rounds. Then Dak Prescott, Saquon Barkley, Sam Darnold, Anthony Richardson, Bucky Irving, Tua, Ladd McConkey, Michael Penix, Jonathan Taylor, and then I took Kyren Williams, as I told everybody I was going to pretty much.
Alfredo.
Good job, Alfredo. We'll get to that pick
Sorry.
in just a second. So again, round 4, Laporta, Prescott, Barkley, Darnold, Richardson, Bucky, Tua, McConkey, Higgins, Penix, Taylor, and Kyron Williams. I wonder, Alfredo, in the Superflex format where we talked about floor does actually matter just a little bit. Dak Prescott, we've seen him when he's healthy over the last 5 years, for the most part, perform like a top 5 fantasy quarterback. There was one season that was kind of the exception to that. But I can't think of a situation that feels more volatile than this Dallas situation. Who knows what's going to happen other. I think he's going to be there. How do you feel safe with Dak as your QB2?
Yeah, as my QB2, sure. I feel pretty safe with him. Like you said, he's one of those guys that we've seen him kind of be a top 5, top 8 quarterback almost every single season, but that's it. Like, I feel safe. I don't feel excited having him as and then, like, for example, in this one for Josh, it's his QB1. I think it's fine for the build that he has. I wouldn't be overly excited with it because with everything that you said, this Cowboys team really worries me. It's Jerry Jones kind of isn't letting go of the reins, and we don't really know what we're going to see with this team. And they just make me really uneasy, if I'm being quite honest.
So I haven't been yelled at by Thomas for this yet, but I think it's time to take a break. So let's take our first break, and then we'll get to round 5. So I started off round 5 with Jordan Addison. I felt pretty good about that pick. Right afterwards, though, Alfredo takes Rashee Rice, and Jacob got upset. And it's not just because Jacob is a Kansas City Chiefs fan. It's because Rice has immense upside. I wonder, and I'll just ask you, Alfredo, like, how much do you concern yourself with Rice's current health, the knee injury that wasn't an ACL, it was an LCL, and then also the potential of a suspension, and then finally the emergent, like Xavier Worthy kind of took the Rashee Rice path in the second half of this season. What do you think that, like, when we see Rice again, he's just the clear alpha number 1 in this offense?
If we're gonna put labels, I don't know that I'd say clear alpha number 1. I feel like there's gonna be a lot of 1A, 1B, 1C, but I don't care. I want whoever has that wide receiver 1 moniker on their name in Kansas City, and Rashee Rice has kind of shown that even though he's like, not a one-trick pony, maybe a 2-trick pony, his tricks are really good. And him catching the ball underneath and being able to run after catch, it's one of those things that it's going to lend itself to a lot more PPR success. And I mean, prior to the injury, this was a guy that I think we were all looking at him as in the same area as probably Nico Collins, Drake London, where all those guys went in round 3 in terms of dynasty value. So yeah, I mean, injury and suspension is probably a couple games we're thinking here.
I have
maybe
Jacob, you have a better lean on this. I have no, like, if I had to put an over under on it, I think I'd put it at 5.5.
I've been shooting under that, but I have no idea how to speculate on it really. And just on the question of, is he the alpha? I think it's clear that he will be. I think Worthy is, has shown that he can contribute, but I think it's like clear Rice is locked in as the guy.
A month ago, like, it wasn't even a question. I may have even made the joke of calling Xavier Worthy Skydarius Toney. I did. And then, like, he just flipped the switch. And it is, they say, I think, that Marquise Brown being back really helped him because they could stop asking him to do things that they didn't want him to have to do in the first place. But back to the Superflex portion of this show. Bryce Young, Michael Penix Jr., you took both of them, Gibbs, back-to-back picks. I have them back-to-back in my Superflex QB rankings. You took Penix first. Is that just an upside thing? Man, speaking of guys who seem to have flipped a switch in the second half of the season, Bryce Young looked fantastic in the last month.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, I think there's upside with both of those guys. And since I did wait on QB, I was happy to get both of them and just see. I went with Penix over him because I do think there's more upside. I've been really intrigued by what Atlanta has shown now that they finally have got him in and they've been able to run some boots and different kinds of looks. The arm talent is really fun. But yeah, there's also been some kind of scary misses. It's just such a small sample size that I really don't know, but that kind of tracks with what we had seen from him at the collegiate level and what people were concerned with the arm angles and everything. And so I was super psyched to be able to get Bryce there as well, just in case Penix does have a rough year too.
Okay, Alfredo, you said you don't probably weight the tight end premium as heavily as some people do. Definitely not as heavily as Jacob Gibbs may. But we're 5 rounds into this draft. George Kittle just went. I think he was the 4th tight end to be drafted in this draft. Are we approaching a tight end run?
I mean, not. I think we kind of. I don't want to say we saw the tight end run, but I think after this, the position gets very nebulous. They're kind of all the same. There's always that plateau that you get to with the position where a lot of these guys you're taking a shot on are the sick in the head. I hope they still break out in year 6 kind of people, like Kyle Pitts, and I don't know. Like it's at this point you're looking at guys like Mark Andrews. How many years does he have left? Tucker Kraft. Like what's the real version of Tucker Kraft? How good is that Packers offense going to be? Looking at some of these names here.
Is the obvious name.
My very next words were going to be Jacob Gibbs, defend Dalton Kincaid, please.
I wish that I could, because in our league, Heath and I have a league, Alfredo, where we draft 2. You start 2 tight ends, and tight end receptions are worth 2 points. And I traded my first round pick to go this year's upcoming rookie first round pick, 2025, to go up and get Heath's first round pick, and I took Dalton Kincaid with that pick. And it looks like one of the worst decisions I've made in a long time. I wanted to take Trey McBride, but I'm managing this team with 4 other people, and they talked me into Dalton Kincaid. And so I have Kincaid and Brock Bowers in this league, and it could have been McBride and Brock Bowers. Oh, and by the way, that pick that I traded to Heath ended up being the 101.
Yeah, and just like he didn't just trade the future first, he traded his second in the startup along with it, which happened to be Jamar Chase. So it was Jamar Chase. It was Jamar Chase and the 2025 101 for Dalton Kincaid. And then me being the jerk that I am, when I made the playoffs with his 101, tried to trade back for Kincaid and made an insultingly low offer and told him that Kincaid wasn't any good. It really, I feel almost bad about how the whole thing worked out. I feel worse about the fact that I haven't gone over round 5 yet. So let's talk.
It's such a good story, though. I feel like the Carolina Panthers with Bryce Young last year is where our team is. And so I'm hoping the Kincaid can make me feel better this year like Bryce did.
Perfect. Yes, I would take that. Jordan Addison started off round 5, then Rashee Rice, then Bryce Young. Then we had Josh Jacobs, Xavier Worthy, and DJ Moore, James Cook, TJ Hawkinson, and Chase Brown, George Kittle, Kenneth Walker, and Zay Flowers. I think the most interesting thing about that round to me, Gibbs, since you just picked, is Ken Walker. This was like right about RB12 was probably just about where you would expect him to go last year, and about where I still have him this year. But we saw Zach Charbonnet have some success. We've seen Walker pile up more injuries. Where are you at on the Seattle backfield in Dynasty?
Yeah, I drafted a lot of Charbonnet over the years, so I'm happy holding him. And Ken Walker, I think I would just be kind of avoiding. Like, there's a lot of other guys in this range who I think bring similar kind of upside, and I feel a lot safer about. As you can see with my team here, I've gone 6 rounds without a running back, so that's kind of where I'm at with Dynasty startups. Unless it's a really, really good value, like I almost took Etienne in the 3rd. I felt good about that, but otherwise I'm pretty much avoiding the position early on, and so Walker definitely is not somebody I would be investing in it early on.
So you passed on Kincaid. Alfredo just sniped me by taking Kincaid, and let's just talk about my team for a second. I've got Josh Allen, Kyron Williams, Nico Collins, Jordan Addison, and Caleb Williams. So Allen and Williams are the quarterbacks. Nico and Addison are the wide receivers. Kyron is my only running back. I have no idea who I'm going to take on this, but I think I've left my options open as to whether I am playing for the future or playing for this year, which may also just mean I have done a bad job of drafting one way or the other. All of the wide receivers that I keep trying to find in the chat have already been taken. So, Alfredo, I want to ask you, Chuba Hubbard was taken by Jamie with the 68th pick in this draft. It's going to be a while, I would assume, before we see Jonathan Brooks. How are you feeling about Chuba as a, maybe a number 2 dynasty running back? And is this just a little bit too early?
I think my initial thought was going to be that it was too early, and then you just start to think that we kind of said the same thing all offseason about drafting Chuba Hubbard in general in drafts. Like, you don't want to get him too early. You want to make sure you get a value. I think we tend to trick ourselves into thinking that Dynasty's a lot longer than it is. Like, it's really just redraft plus. And it's, we're so impatient with these things. If I know that I'm going to have a really good running back, give me at least another good year, I'm happy with that. I don't know that I'm necessarily saying this is too early, because we may never get the Jonathan Brooks that we all wanted and hoped for and expected. These injuries piling on like this are really serious, and they've got me very, very scared about Jonathan Brooks, who I was really high on.
Yeah, I was unfortunately high on Jonathan Brooks. I have too much of him in rookie drafts. I know, Jacob, you were pretty high on him in redraft. Is he someone, if during a rookie draft you can, oh, wow, is that accurate? We have a Seahawks firing that just happened. Do you feel like Jonathan Brooks, if you can get him for a second in a rookie draft this year, would you do that, Gibbs?
Yeah, I think so, but man, it's tough, and it's depressing. I have a ton of Jonathan Brooks, and he looked really good. It was a really small sample size, but he got going there and just looked powerful, looked really like everything you thought he would be with the jump cuts and everything. But this is tough. Yeah, I think it makes good value for him.
Yeah, definitely a mid-second, probably an early second, and just loving life if I can get him for anything less than that. Alfredo, did you just go back-to-back? You did back-to-back with tight ends, Dalton Kincaid and Mark Andrews, and I think that's pretty good. Like, if Mark Andrews is still Mark Andrews. Like, we took a step back this year, right? How do you view that Andrews dynamic going into 20? Are the playoffs going to have a big impact on that?
I think they always do. People always remember like what you did lately for me, and the playoffs, even though they don't count towards fantasy and they're never used when we all put together our stats and what a player did last year, the playoffs matter so much. They stick in the minds of not only just the fans, but the coaches as well. And I think we still got to see that Mark Andrews has it. He's not totally washed. And I think that if you're willing to believe in Lamar Jackson and this Ravens offense, and maybe they're not totally mutually exclusive, but I do think that you still kind of have to believe quite a bit in Mark Andrews, who showed that he still does have it down the line. Like, he didn't just totally burn out here, which, by the way, the other player I was up against here I was thinking Brandon Ayuk. He went 2 picks later, and I have a little bit of buyer's remorse, but I'm glad this is a mock so I can just try some weird stuff.
Yeah, I don't know at all. I mean, you passed on him for Jaden Reed, Gibbs. So where are you at on Brandon Ayuk, who, again, a year ago at this time, we were all expecting, I think he may have been a consensus top 12 dynasty wide receiver.
Yeah, him and Reed are tough to evaluate because they both have some data points that are extremely bullish. And they both play in offenses that can, produce elite efficiency. I guess going with Reed is that he's younger, and I feel more confident in Jordan Love. And he's not currently hurt. Like, he could have a big run in the playoffs or something like that. But at the same time, it's been a really frustrating second half of the season here. But I think so much of that has to do with Green Bay just going extremely run heavy, which I don't think necessarily is like something that is going to continue going forward. It might be the case next year, but yeah, Ayuk's tough to evaluate because even before he got hurt, he wasn't, and this could just be from missed time, but he wasn't playing the same kind of role that he had been in the past, in terms of target volume and all that. And then we saw Juwan Jennings come in and be really productive. I don't know. I'm a little bit hesitant on Ayuk.
Okay, Gibbs. So I've got confirmation from Schaefer in the private chat. Ryan Grubb let go by the Seattle Seahawks. He did make it like maybe twice as many games as Shane Waldron did in Chicago. But does this have any impact on how you view what we saw from JSN and DK Metcalf this year? In the second half of the year, JSN kind of became the alpha in this offense. Obviously, Tyler Lockett just completely went away. DK Metcalf struggled until, I guess it was week 18. He looked okay. But was that more of a grub thing? Was that more of an injury thing? Or was that more of a no, JSN's just an alpha now and DK is fading away?
I think I lean more towards the latter there. I was really impressed with Jason this year. I don't think that it was necessarily like Grubb scheming him stuff, because honestly, for most of the season, Grubb was trying to get the ball to DK Metcalf. I'm surprised to see him go, because it does feel like he didn't get a fair shake here with the offensive line play this year. But at the same time, I think part of the problem with Seattle this year was that Grubb was just not very reactive to what was happening and what his circumstances were. And he kept trying to design all this downfield stuff to DK Metcalf, and it was getting them in second and long, third and long, over and over and over. So I think, if anything, we could see with them moving in a different direction, even, more looks for Jason, like more of an offense that's centered around him, because I think that makes sense given their personnel.
I thought round 6 was a really interesting round. We had Devontae Smith and Tyreek Hill at the top. We could talk about that for the next hour. Matthew Stafford, then J.J. McCarthy, Rome Odunze, Chris Olave, George Pickens, Chuba Hubbard, Jalen Waddle, Jamison Williams, Dalton Kincaid, and then I took DK Metcalf. So it's Smith, Hill, Stafford, McCarthy, Odunze, Olave, Pickens, Hubbard, Waddle, Williams, Kincaid, and Metcalf. Alfredo, we had a question in the chat about Tyreek's comments. Started off like it seemed like a normal interview. By the end of it, I think he had officially requested a trade. He says, "I'm out." How are you viewing Tyreek as a 30-year-old wide receiver who doesn't want to play on the team that just guaranteed him $60 million over the next 3 years? Where is this a good value for Tyreek, or are you scared?
I will say, as a Dolphins fan, I am scared. It kind of, that interview was weird, by the way. It kind of seemed like he started it very professionally, and then mid-sentence decided, you know what, I'm out of here, and kind of just made that deal right there. I mean, older wide receivers worry me, but older wide receivers that have to rely on their athleticism worry me even more. So I think whether he's staying with Miami or even going to a new team, even a better team, a better offense, better quarterback, whatever you want to say, I think the downward trajectory for Tyreek Hill is real. I think this is we see this often with players that rely solely on speed, and obviously he's a very talented player, but they drop off the cliff really, really fast as they get older. And him being at that 30 mark, it worries me a lot. So I do think this value is kind of about right in terms of where he'd be going in a dynasty startup. I was actually really looking at both Jalen Waddle and Jamison Williams, because I would have them over Tyreek if I was looking at the draft board.
Yeah, I had Jamison Williams as the top guy in my queue. Gibbs, McCarthy goes to the Sam Darnold manager. Is it as simple as that? If Darnold stays in Minnesota, you've definitely got a borderline QB1. If Darnold leaves Minnesota, then listen, they just made Sam Darnold a borderline QB1. JJ McCarthy's probably going to be that good too.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I love Kevin O'Connell. I think he deserves all the praise that he gets. And so I definitely think he could be successful with McCarthy as well. I think it makes sense to pair those two up.
Alfredo, we are coming to the end of round 8. I'm going to read the round 7 results in just a moment, but I'm looking and I've got the quarterbacks sorted by kind of an interesting ranking. It's the guy, how I had them ranked at the start of last year. And so the best quarterbacks available: Russell Wilson, Kirk Cousins, Will Levis, Deshaun Watson, Daniel Jones, Derek Carr, Gardner Minshew, Justin Fields. Any interest in any of those guys?
The only one that piques my interest slightly is Russell Wilson.
Yeah,
because I think he might be the only one that's still starting next season. But yeah, it's a wasteland at this point. This is where I'm absolutely turning my attention elsewhere from quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins, I think, is just done. I think the Justin Fields is fetch. We keep trying to make it happen. It's not going to happen. It doesn't matter what team, doesn't matter what weapons. It's not happening. Derek Carr, I think we've seen what he is at his best, at his worst. So the only guy here that I think I have any fantasy interest in remains Russell Wilson.
So Gibbs, I think it's interesting because I kind of just assume that Carr's going to start again next year. The Saints probably have at least 2 tank years before they're in a position to where they can field a reasonably competitive football team, or they can just keep eating salary cap and try to get to 500 every year. In the Superflex league, do you just if you need a QB3, do you want a guy like Carr who's probably going to start, or a guy like Fields who, if he on the rare chance he gets to start, he might be a league-altering guy?
I'm fine with Carr if he falls to me, basically. I don't want to reach for him, really. I wouldn't really be excited about taking him in this range, but I thought he played pretty well early in the year before everybody got hurt, before he got hurt. And there were some, exciting signs from the offensive changes there. So I don't think he's a terrible pick in this range when you get to the bottom. You're scraping the bottom of the barrel here.
Let's take our second break. We'll talk about round 7. We'll talk about the ridiculous pick that I just made.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more.
It's Gareth Bale! Ronaldo! Wonderful goal!
On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
Round 7 of this Superflex tight end premium PPR Dynasty startup mock, as I should say, that you've probably gathered by now, without rookies. I took Terry McLaurin to start the round. Then Alfredo Brown immediately gave me buyer's remorse by taking Mark Andrews, good pick. Then Jaden Reed, then Brandon Ayuk, then Chris Godwin, who is a free agent, by the way. Then Jerry Jeudy, which I think is an interesting place for him, still young, but who's his QB. Then Christian McCaffrey. How ridiculous does that look at pick 79 overall on the draft board? Then David Montgomery, Deebo Samuel, Mike Evans, Aaron Rodgers, and Isaiah Pacheco. That is the wildest round of a startup mock I've maybe ever seen. McLaurin, Andrews, Reed, Ayuk, Godwin, Jeudy, McCaffrey, Jeudy, McCaffrey, Jeudy, then McCaffrey, Montgomery, Deebo, Evans, Rodgers, Pacheco. I don't know which outlandish thing I'm more interested in, but let's start with Christian McCaffrey at pick 79 to Adam Azer. Where are you at on this, Jacob Gibbs?
No idea. No idea what to do with that guy. And I think that is reflected in drafts. You see him go all over the place. This range is obviously hilarious to see him with some of these names. Mm-hmm. I would take David Montgomery ahead of him, I think. That might be crazy. It depends on your team construction. So this is Azer. He's already got Bucky Irving and James Cook. So it feels really good at running back. Honestly, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, his team has the ability to compete next year for sure. He has Joe Burrow and Baker Mayfield as well, but he also has a lot of really young guys. So this is like truly just a swing on upside. If McCaffrey hits, then like he has the ability to compete, and if not, then it's not that big of a deal because he has a young core.
Yeah, I think that's right. Jerry Jeudy went 1 pick before him, Alfredo. Jerry Jeudy may have still finished the second half of the season as a top 10 wide receiver in the second half. He's still, I think he's 25 or 26 years old, like entering the prime of his NFL career. But he's not going to have Jameis Winston. We don't even know what team he's probably going to play on. How do you feel about Jerry Jeudy in Dynasty at this point, Alfredo?
This is another guy that I keep being the wet blanket, but I kind of feel like we know what Jerry Jeudy is, and we've seen this same song and dance before. Every time Jameis Winston ends up starting for a team, there's like one guy that he makes really, really good, and then when Jameis isn't there, it's just like, oh, okay, that's what that guy actually is. I mean, it's not like Jerry hasn't had a bunch of opportunities to be good throughout his career, and even this year, I know he kind of did like the DeAndre Swift thing where he had like 3 or 4 games where he was really, really good. And all the people that have been sick in the head and waiting for him to break out said, see, I told you, it's been there. And it's not that Jerry Judy's not a good player. For one reason or another, he hasn't really quite put it together. And then, we kind of saw him crash back down to earth. It wasn't really the same guy over the last few weeks. And if it's taking 18 targets for a guy to put up these kind of numbers, I don't know that Jerry Judy's getting that next season in the Browns offense or really any offense. So I'm not as high on Jerry Jeudy as other people. And actually on the Football Guys Dynasty show, I recommended selling Jerry Jeudy right now because this is his highest that his Dynasty value has been in like 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, you probably should have sold him a month ago.
Right.
would have been the ideal time to sell. Let's take a look at round 8. Starts with Joe Mixon, Derrick Henry. We've reached that portion of the draft. The next thing we're going to talk about is how many running backs Joshua Cho has, because I've got a feeling it's 17. But Mixon and Henry and David Njoku. There's Kyle Pitts at pick 88. Gibbs loves it. Geno Smith, Cortland Sutton. There's another old running back in James Conner. Jamie sniped Dan with Tyrone Tracy, so he took Zach Charbonnet away from Gibbs, who settled for Brian Robinson. Jalen McMillan goes 95th, and then I took Russell Wilson. Alfredo, is Jalen McMillan's dynasty value entirely dependent on whether or not Chris Godwin stays in Tampa?
I wouldn't say entirely, but a lot of it is based on that. And a little bit of it, if I'm just being honest, was a panic pick because I realized I talked way too long, had 6 seconds on the clock. I looked up my rankings and said, yep, Jalen McMillan seems good. And I threw him on there. That's what you get for not having a Q on a podcast. But, I wouldn't be upset with Jalen McMillan as my wide receiver 3 on a dynasty team. He's shown throughout the end of the season here that he can be productive and he's not going to be just a one-trick pony. I think a lot of for him throughout the season was he just was not comfortable coming from the concepts that he was running in Washington's offense with Ryan Grubb to the NFL and running this kind of whole new system with Liam Cohen. He just did not look comfortable running his routes. He was running everything at what seemed like 75% speed and his hands weren't confident. He didn't have his hands up all the time, doing a lot of body catches. And then as the season went on, you see him get a little bit more comfortable. He was able to play through contact. He was able to do things that you see pro receivers doing. So I would say most of his dynasty value is going to depend on Chris Godwin, but I think even if Chris Godwin comes back, I don't know that he's going to be the same Chris Godwin that we are used to.
We are flying through this round, this mock. Let's get to round 9. This is the ridiculous pick that I made, Gibbs, that maybe was a great pick. Maybe the pick of the draft in a tight end premium draft. I start the draft round 9 off with Travis Kelce. Right after him, Ricky Pearsall, Josh Downs, Jonathan Brooks. This is just the hopes and dreams round. Jacoby Myers, Michael Pittman, Jonnu Smith, Alvin Kamara, Isaiah Likely, Khalil Shakir. That was a good pick from Pfeiffer.
Mm-hmm.
Travis Etienne and DeAndre Swift. So Kelce, Pearsall, Downs, Brooks, Myers, Pittman, Smith, Kamara, Likely, Shakir, Etienne, Swift. Is the Kelce pick like a great pick if he announces he's coming back in 6 weeks after the Chiefs win the Super Bowl? Or is it just a terrible pick because he's going to retire after they win the Super Bowl?
Yeah, you got the chance that he retires. And also, he was tied in 3 this year. I did not feel like he looked very good this year. Somebody who watches all of the Chiefs games. And with Rashee Rice coming back, I wouldn't be surprised if he is even less of a priority in terms of getting him the ball next year. He might kind of just be along for the ride if he is here next year. This is earlier than I would take him. I'm curious what you think as somebody who also watches the Chiefs all the time.
I was really down on Kelce coming into this year. He was my bust at the tight end position. I think that was warranted, even though he finished as tight end 3. He wasn't worth the cost, but in a tight end premium league, if we're getting, he still had a lot of catches. He still had a lot of targets. He's just not doing much after the catch, and the touchdowns are kind of disappearing. I think it's entirely dependent on if he comes back. If he comes back, I think this cost for a tight end in a tight end premium league is a great buy. But the reason he's this cheap is because there is a legitimate chance that Travis Kelce could retire in 6 weeks after the Chiefs inevitably win the Super Bowl. Yeah, I'm jinxing it just over and over and over again, Alfredo. It's okay, though. Who cares? Nobody does. What do you think about Khalil Shakir? Now, Pfeiffer is obviously your nemesis, the Bills homer. I'm going to try to you took your pick, so I don't have to talk too long about that. The Bills are certainly going to go get a number 1 wide receiver next year, right?
I mean, you'd think, didn't they already do that? We got a number 1 wide receiver at home. Amari Cooper is supposed to be there. I don't know what it is about the Bills. They kind of feel cursed. Everyone that we think is supposed to be their number 1 wide receiver just really isn't. Whether it was Dalton Kincaid, a lot of people were believing in Keon Coleman coming out, and they go and get the trade for Amari Cooper. And it's who's been consistent no matter what? Khalil Shakir. And I just don't think that enough people really take that into consideration. The intangible part of it is that quarterbacks like who they like. Quarterbacks are going to continue to throw the ball to guys who just simply get open. And that's what Khalil Shakir has always done, whether it was in Boise State or in the pros. He's been one of those guys that I've held on to every single share that I have of him in dynasty leagues, and it has just blossomed beautifully. So this is one of those times where I'd say, like, I don't know if the wide receiver one necessarily matters in this team because Josh Allen spreads the ball out so much, and the touchdown variance, a lot of it falls on Josh Allen rushing. So it's just kind of who are going to be the guys that get the targets. Right now, it's been Khalil Shakir.
Let's run through round 10, then we'll get to our teams and we'll get out of here. I want to tell everybody, first off, thanks for being here and watching this mock if you're watching on YouTube, or thanks for listening. I want to tell everybody thank you for listening to the podcast. And if you want to know the last 6 rounds of this draft, go to cbssports.com. This afternoon, it will be posted. Also, thank you to everyone who participated. Obviously, I was in this draft. Alfredo was in this draft. Gibbs was in this draft. We had Dan, not on the can. We had Jamie. We had Matt Donnelly. We had Azer. We had Matt Cooper from Couch Scouts. We had Joel Cox, Adam Pfeiffer, JB Cho Knows, and RJ White. Alfredo trying really hard not to auto pick, and he failed. He didn't. I feel like a couple of times here I have saved you from that, but I was unable to do that because I was talking. Round 10, RJ starts it off with Tucker Kraft, then Derek Carr, Rashad White. Cooper Kupp goes with pick 112, in case you thought Christian McCaffrey at pick 79 wasn't funny enough. Matt Cooper takes Aaron Jones, Keon Coleman, Devontae Adams, Pat Freiermuth, Calvin Ridley, Trey Benson, Tank Dell, J.K. Dobbins. Gibbs, I'm going to read the names again. You tell me your favorite pick in round 10. Kraft, Carr, White, Kupp, Jones, Coleman, Adams, Muth, Ridley, Benson, Dell, and Dobbins.
I actually really like Dobbins at the end of the round there. I thought about taking him because I need somebody who can help me this year. I just got Pollard on the way back. So it was like those type of guys. And I think people will forget how young Dobbins is. And I have been really encouraged what we've seen from him. I think Coleman is an interesting pick too. He was somebody I was really down on coming in, but he's played well. He's made some big plays. And he's shown the ability to like go up and get the ball and really shield people off and make those types of plays, which I think could be huge with Josh Allen as he gets more comfortable together. Like you said, they're probably going to bring somebody else in. But if they don't, then that I think signals a lot of belief in Coleman. I think he might be their guy. I mean, they drafted him. They traded back and drafted him early to be the guy. And it's just been kind of an up and down season with injuries. But he's really intriguing at this range of the draft.
Let's take a look at Alfredo's team. How much anxiety did you get when I just said that, Alfredo? I wonder how many of your players, without looking at your roster in the draft room, you could actually name on your team currently. At quarterback, you have Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray. Starting running backs are Jonathan Taylor and Najee Harris. Wide receivers, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Rashee Rice, Jalen McMillan. You have both Dalton Kincaid and Mark Andrews at tight end. And on injured reserve, on your bench, you have Tank Dell and Ricky Pearsall. Grade your own team.
I think started off really strong. Things looked great. Really petered out there at the end. I'll give this a really strong B. It was very strong. It was probably closer to an A at the beginning. Looking at it like a B- towards the end. I'll give this like a B+.
Jacob Gibbs at quarterback. You have Drake May and Bryce Young. That's fun. At running back, Brian Robinson Jr. and Trey Benson. At wide receiver, Drake London, Jamison Williams, Jaden Reed. Brock Bowers at tight end, obviously. Josh Downs at the flex. You also have Michael Penix at quarterback. Even more fun. And Tony Pollard at the flex. How do you feel about this roster?
Tony Pollard RB2. I don't know if Trey Benson's going to be helping me anytime soon. Yeah, it's a risky build, but this is kind of the way I roll in Dynasty. Like my next 10 picks, probably 8 of them would be running backs. And so just load up on lottery tickets. Some of these young guys like Jaylen Warren, if he makes it back, those kind of guys are going to be found on most of my Dynasty rosters. And so it just kind of comes down to what happens. If we get a year like this year where none of the running backs really get hurt, then I've got to really hit on some of these early picks. And if not, then, if I get some of these running backs to step in, then it's a really, really good team. I don't know. I'm curious, like This is full PPR, start 3 receivers, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know if my receivers are strong enough for this to be a strong team. I'm going to give this team a B minus. It's got a lot of
How do you feel about the Brock Bowers pick now, looking at the team through 11 rounds?
I feel good about it. Like, McBride wasn't going to make it back to me. I guess I could have taken Laporta in round 4. But yeah, I feel good about it. That's the only chance I was going to have to get Brock Bowers, and I think he's just going to be so valuable in this format.
And now you guys can both critique my team. I've got Josh Allen and Caleb Williams and Russell Wilson are my quarterbacks. At running back, I have Kyron Williams and J.K. Dobbins. The wide receivers are Nico Collins, Jordan Addison, and DK Metcalf, and Terry McLaurin. And at tight end, I have Travis Kelce and Evan Ingram, a combined 100 years old.
I'm going to give, I feel like we're boring with these rankings, but this is in the B range for me as well. I'm going to give this a B plus. You got a ton of upside with your receivers. Like, all 4 of those guys could have really strong seasons. And they're also relatively young. Caleb is probably going to be what swings this team, as well as your tight ends. I don't feel much confidence in either one of those tight ends. I felt like, and this could be influenced by injury, but I felt like Evan Ingram didn't quite look like himself when he got back, and sort of similar to Tyreek Hill. He's a guy whose game is predicated on speed and athleticism. And we also don't necessarily know what's going to happen with him next year, what his role is going to be, where it's going to be. So if him and Kelce are kind of nothing in this format, then that's rough.
It was like we're playing blackjack, Alfredo. I got the B plus. I'm gonna stay. No hit. You don't have to say anything about the team, Alfredo, though I do want you to tell everybody where they can find your dynasty work this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, you can always follow me on any of the social media platforms at Alfredo A. Brown. And then you can always check out the Football Guys Dynasty podcast with Jagger May, Jeff Bell. They bring me on there all the time here in the offseason to talk rookies and dynasty stuff. And then, of course, my show, the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show with Dave Kluge. We're going to be going on throughout the offseason as well, talking about rookies. And there might be like a little bit of crossover into dynasty as well. So lots of cool stuff happening over at Football Guys this offseason.
Can I clip that and send it to Dave where you say my show, the football
show? Yeah,
my show, the Football Guys show with Dave Kluge?
I said it.
It's Alfredo's show with. I love it. I absolutely love it. Dave will love it.
Alfredo
More
Brown
than
show
I do.
featuring Dave Kluge.
Yeah. Yes. Gibbs, you do all kinds of awesome stuff at Sportsline and in the newsletter. What's coming up this offseason?
Yeah, check out my show, Beyond the Box Score, featuring Dan Schneier. It's my show. It's great. We'll be back. Love you, Dan. We'll be back with some off-season content soon. Lot of dynasty centric stuff. That's the type of stuff that I'm psyched to get into in the off season, is like reevaluating everything we just saw. And then obviously digging into the rookies as well, but mostly like providing that frame of reference on what we just saw from the year 1, year 2 guys, and like what that potentially means looking forward. And so that's the kind of stuff that's coming up soon.
Thank you to everybody who followed along on YouTube, was active in the chat. Thank you to everybody who participated in this draft, and everybody listening over on Spotify. Go give us 5 stars and a review. Later this month, we will be doing a 5-star review mailbag. So get your questions in there. We will not have an episode on Friday this week. We will not have an episode on Tuesday next week. We will talk to you next Friday, the 17th. And then after that, it's off-season time. We're going 2 Dynasty shows a week, Tuesdays and Fridays. I cannot wait. We'll talk to you next Friday.